everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing my 10 cards 1 kit featuring the Simon Says stamp July 2018 card kit. I'm starting with card 1 and I'm stamping out all of my images, and then I'm going to use my ScanNCut to die cut them all. For the first card, I'm going to be using the pineapples. I've die cut a panel using the My Favorite Thing stitched rectangle die, and I'm going to work on my sentiment. I'm using VersaFine ink to stamp out your one cool pineapple. And I've colored all of my images off screen just to save a little time in this video, but I will have everything listed in my blog post in case you're interested in what colors I used. So I cut out a section from the white panel, and I'm going to use this really pretty pink pattern paper. I go ahead and adhere that to my card base, and then I take the two panels I split apart and I put it on some fun foam, and then I adhere that to the top of the card base. The pineapples, I'm adhering them in the center of the card, and I'm popping those up with a little bit of foam tape. And then I take the glasses and I color them in with a black Copic marker, and then I adhere it directly to one of the pineapples that's in the front. I add a few sequins from the kit. And then I take some glossy accents and I add it to the glasses so that my little cool pineapple has shiny glasses. And that will complete card 1. For card 2, I'm starting with a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock, and this is the My Favorite Things Radiating Rays stencil, and I'm taking some Squeezed Lemonade Distress Oxide and Wild Honey Distress Oxide, and I'm ink blending that over my paper. Once I have that complete, I'm gonna trim my panel down. And then I take a piece of fun foam and I add that to the back of my panel. I go ahead and adhere that to my card base, and I just have a little bit of white peeking through the sides, not necessarily the top and the bottom. So then I add a little bit more of the Distress Oxide inks onto the panel. I felt the white was just too stark on that card, so I added just a little bit of more color. Then I take my cactus that I've colored off screen, I pop it up on some foam tape, and the sentiment I'm using says "You've Got Style," and I've adhered that to a black piece of cardstock, and I've die cut that with a My Favorite Things Die-Namics Slanted sentiment strip, and I pop that up on foam tape and adhere that to the center or to the bottom edge of my card. And then I take some Simon Says stamp, I believe it's Schoolhouse Red, dye ink, and I take the heart stamp from the stamp set and I add a few little red hearts on my panel. Now I should have gone over these with like a darker Copic marker, because you can notice some of it, some of the sun rays through the hearts. But anyhow, I'm just adding a little bit of glossy accents, and that will complete card 2. For card 3, I wanted to create a little bit of a beach scene, and so I took a craft cardstock from my stash, and I've ripped the top portion off. Then I'm going to take some texture paste, and with my spatula I'm just adding it really messy on there because I want quite a bit of texture. When that's done, I take some gold embossing powder and I pour that on there. My plan is to create sand, and so this was my intention by using these two products. I melt the embossing powder, and then I take a I think this is a Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die, and I cut my patterned paper along with the beach sand dune, and then I'm taking some really strong adhesive and I'm adding that to the back. I adhere those two together, and then I can add my little scene to the card base. I'm using some liquid adhesive just so that I have a few seconds of wiggle room and add it on there straight. The sentiment I'm using is from the sticker pack, and I adhere that to a white cardstock, and then I just fussy cut around the letters. Once I have those fussy cut, I'm going to use some foam tape and pop up the sentiment, and then I'll pop up my little flamingo up on some foam tape as well, and I adhere all of that together, and that will complete that card. For card 4, I'm starting by cutting apart one of the card bases that came in the kit, and I'm taking the sun stamp and I'm stamping it all over my card panel. Now I could have used the stamp from the card kit with the little circle stamp and stamped in my color for the sun, but I chose to color it in with the Copic markers, and so I did that off camera. And then I've die cut all of my components. The black cardstock was cut with a Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die. The sun panel was die cut with a My Favorite Things stitched rectangle die, and then I cut out that little sun with a Hero Arts circle die, and I'm coloring it in with my Copics. I kept this one in just to show you how I did all of the other suns. I take a the blue panel that is from the card kit, and I'm adhering that to a card base. And then I take my sun panel and I adhere that flat to on top of the blue card. And then the sentiment I'm using is from the sticker set, and it says "Sunshine on My Mind." Since I am a Florida girl, I thought that was fitting. I attach that to the black cardstock. I pop that up a little bit on some foam tape, and I adhered that to the center of the card. For card 5, I wanted to do a little bit of mirror stamping with the fish. So I'm using my Misty to stamp out the image onto the rubber stamp, and then I can press my cardstock on top of that and get a mirror image of my stamp. And since it did not stamp strong, I'm taking a journaling black pen and I'm just outlining the image. And once it's cut and colored, it's really not noticeable at all. For my panel I'm working on, I'm using the Waves panel pattern paper from the kit, and I'm just adding a little bit of color to it with Salty Ocean Distress Oxide. I've lined up the panel in my Misty, and I'm going to stamp my sentiment, which reads, "Wishing you a happy birthday." I'm using that die as a guide to know where to stamp it in the center. That die was a Craft and Desert Diva inside Scallop rectangle die, and I've cut out a piece of white cardstock with that to create a frame. And I'm popping that frame up just on a little bit of 3M foam tape. And then I can go ahead and adhere that to my panel. And then I take my little fish, and I'm using my Spectrum Noir glitter brush pens to color it in. Once those are colored in, I go ahead and pop them up on some foam squares. And then to finish this card off, I add a few sequins to the card panel, to the Waves card panel. Oh, first I go ahead and adhere that to the card base. And then I take the sequins from the card kit and I add a few to the card. And there's a close-up to that card. For card 6, I'm starting with a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock, and I'm doing a little bit of ink blending with Worn Lipstick Distress Oxide. Once I'm done adding the ink to my paper, I spray that with a distress sprayer, and I get some large and small droplets of water, and then I mop that up with a paper towel. Then I take the flamingo stamp and I stamp those kind of all over randomly onto that panel. And then I'm going to take a My Favorite Things Die-Namics stitched rectangle die and die cut that piece of vellum. Now this is where I do something silly, and while I love the design of this card, I just don't like this part where I messed up. I should have used a VersaFine. No. I should have used Versamark to stamp it, stamp the sentiment, and add the embossing powder. But because I didn't, I kept having smudging on that sentiment, and if I'm going to give this card to anybody, I'm going to have to redo it because they're just going to get the ink all over them. But anyhow, I take the sentiment that I've got that stamped on a piece of vellum, and I adhered a die cut of the flamingo with the glittery cardstock from the kit, and I've got that adhered to the vellum. And then I'm taking the multimedia mat and I'm just adding that behind all of the letters of the sentiment and behind the flamingos so it would adhere down. And there's a close-up of that card. For card 7, I took it's a My Favorite Things stitched scalloped edge frames die, and I've die cut a white panel with that. And then I took the My Favorite Things Die-Namics stitched interactive window, and I've cut the windows out along the top portion of the card, and since it doesn't cut the window out completely, I just took an X-Acto knife and my ruler and I cut the windows out. So I'm using my Misty to work on the sentiment, and I'm stamping the You're One in a Melon. I go ahead and line that up and stamp it out a couple of times. And then I take the green paper from the kit and I've cut a panel out, which I'm adhering directly to the card base. And then my white panel with the windows cut out, I take some foam tape and I adhere that to the back. And then I'm going to center that to my card base and add that on. I've spilt a little bit of coffee on my watermelon, and so I have to cover it up, and I'm taking again these sunglasses and I've colored them in with black Copic markers, and then I cut them out and I'm adhering the glasses to one of the stamps of the watermelon, which kind of worked out for the better. And then I just added a little bit of interest to the card by drawing out a few lines. And to finish this card, I take a couple of the black hearts from the kit or from the sticker sheet, and I add those on to finish off this card. Oh no, I do add glossy accents. What the glasses would be without glossy accents. For card 8, I took a white panel and fun foam, and I've die cut both of those using the My Favorite Things wonky stitched rectangle die, and I've die cut a heart out of the center of those with a Lawn Fawn outside in stitched heart die. Then I'm going to use the background paper from the sticker sheet as the sort of sunset behind my cactuses. Then I take the sentiment Stuck on You, and I'm inking that up, and then I'm going to stamp it a couple of times so that I get a really bold impression. Then I can adhere my fun foam to my panel, and I should have scooted this paper down just a little bit more so I get the orange in the background, but I didn't. Then I adhere my panel to the top of the card base, and I can pop in my images with some foam tape. And to finish off this card, I take some dye ink. It is Lawn Fawn, I'm not sure what color it is. And I stamp out a few hearts, and I should have stopped at the first 2 hearts, but sometimes you just can't stop, so I kept going, and that was the end result. For card 9, I'm taking the My Favorite Things Mini Cloud Edges stencil, and I'm using peacock feathers. Actually, I think it's Mermaid Lagoon I used, not peacock feathers. Anyhow, I add my clouds, and then I die cut that panel with My Favorite Things, and then I die cut circles out of the panel, and then I pop that up with some foam tape, and I can pop my circles back in, which I'm going to adhere flat. Then I took the birds from the sticker pack and I've added them to a white cardstock, and then I've fussy cut them out, and I'm popping those back with some foam tape, and I can add them to my circles. And since none of these sentiments that I had left fit this card, I took a sentiment from last month's kit and I stamped it out, and it reads, "You are so loved." I pop the loved part onto some foam tape and I adhere that, and then surprise surprise, I add some red hearts to my panel. Again, not really stopping where I should, but I kept going. For my last card, I'm making it really simple, and I took the blue cardstock from the card kit and I've cut a panel out using the Craft & Desert Diva fancy frame dies. I'm adhering that to a white card base, and then I took one of the pattern papers from the kit and I've cut a panel out, and then I'm taking a piece of black cardstock and I've adhered that. No, first I cut it down and then I adhere that directly after I pop the sentiment up on some foam tape. I go ahead and adhere that to the black cardstock, and then I can adhere that directly to my card panel. And there is my final result. Here's a close-up of all of the 10 cards I made using the Simon Says Stamp July 2018 card kit. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.